Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the channel. UFC 286, Leon Edwards versus Kamaru Usman 3 is almost here. And while I'm really excited for this fight card, and there's a bunch of fights on this card I'm looking forward to, there is a lot to hate about UFC 286, and that's what this video is going to be. This is going to be my top 3 reasons I hate UFC 286. I'm going to start off with some honorable mentions, and then I'm going to go from 3 to 1, 1 being the reason I most hate UFC 286. And honestly, the number 1 reason on this list gets me legitimately infuriated. It's an abomination for fight fans, but we'll talk about that later in the video. Before I get into any of my reasons, do me a favor, go look over UFC 286 and comment down below what are some reasons that you hate UFC 286. And also, I'll be doing a top 3 reasons I love UFC 286 video as well. So make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. I do these types of videos for every single UFC pay-per-view card. So starting off with the first honorable mention, and that's the arena. Leon Edwards went out there and defeated a dominant champion in Kamaru Usman after losing the majority of the fight and getting a brutal head kick KO in the last minute to take the welterweight title off of Usman. And the UFC kind of played it up, and Dana White said, oh, we're going to put this in a massive arena in the UK. And ultimately, it's at the O2 Arena. Now, this doesn't bother me all that much. That's why it's an honorable mention. But I feel like what Leon Edwards did to become champion was a special moment in UFC history. And I feel like for this trilogy fight, they could have made this fight feel even bigger by putting it in a higher capacity arena. The O2 Arena, it has a decent capacity. I think it has a 20,000 fan capacity. But this is where they hold all their UFC fight nights. And they teased for a while they're going to do a massive arena for this fight. And ultimately, it's in the same place. They hold Tom Aspinall versus Alexander Volkov. And I think it's a little bit of a, just a downer for UFC 286 and for Leon Edwards. Moving on to another honorable mention. This card, while it's decent, it's a little bit lackluster when you start comparing it to UFC 285 and UFC 287. Now, I know UFC 285, John Jones, Cyril Gane, that card was stacked like crazy for the return of John Jones. But you start looking at that card next to 286, and it makes 286 borderline look like a fight night card. That's a bit of an exaggeration. And then you look at UFC 287, and UFC 287 looks crazy compared to UFC 286. It's not the worst card ever. Believe me, there's some good fights on this card. I'll talk about that in the other video I do about the top 3 reasons I love UFC 286. But comparing it to the before and after pay-per-view, UFC 286 is looking really lackluster. And the last honorable mention I have for you is LaRon Murphy versus Nathaniel Wood got canceled. This was an amazing contender fight. I don't even know if you want to call it a contender fight. A prospect fight that was supposed to be on this card. I know, a lot of people didn't like them matching up UK versus UK, but this was an amazing matchup of 2 young up-and-coming prospects who were on win streaks, who look like they have promising futures. And I'm really disappointed that LaRon Murphy versus Nathaniel Wood got canceled. I think Wood had a leg laceration, had to have something done, and ultimately the fight got canceled. But this would have been a phenomenal fight to feature on UFC 286. Now, moving on to the list, number 3 is kind of 2 reasons molded into 1. But number 3 reason I hate UFC 286 is there's not enough UK fighters on the main card. I believe there's 2 UK fighters on the main card, Joanne Wood and Leon Edwards, and that's it. And I really, really want it, and this is the second part of the 3rd reason why I hate UFC 286. I really wanted Max Holloway versus Arnold Allen on this card. That would have been an amazing featherweight matchup. You have Max Holloway, a former champion, coming off a loss to Alexander Volkanovski, who knows what Max Holloway is going to do now. He has 3 losses to the current champion. And you have Arnold Allen, who is on a crazy streak, but, his last fight ended in an injury, so we really didn't get a full comprehension of what his skill sets are and against good competition. And now he's jumping in the deep end against Max Holloway, and Arnold Allen's from the UK. And I think this would have been a perfect fight to make the co-main event or the featured fight on the main card. This is an incredible matchup. And ultimately, it's a month later. I don't know what reason they didn't get it on UFC 286, But this was a layup for the UFC. There is no doubt they should have made Max Holloway versus Arnold Allen on the UFC 286 main card. And this could arguably a number one contender fight for Arnold Allen. If he beats Max Holloway, I know you got Volkanovski sitting up there as the champion, and you got Yair as the interim champion, but if Arnold Allen beats Max Holloway, there is no doubt that Arnold Allen is in line for a title shot at featherweight. So I just think it's weird that they didn't put this fight on UFC 286. Maybe it was a timing thing for Max or Arnold Allen. I don't know exactly what went on here, but it's just disappointing. And it's disappointing, I think, and again, this doesn't bother me as much, but I think it's a little bit disappointing they didn't put more UK fighters on the pay-per-view main card of UFC 286. I guess Patty's injured. I guess Tom Aspinall's injured, so I kind of understand it. But at the same time, it's just a little bit disappointing for this card, and I really wish that Max Holloway versus Arnold Allen was on this main card, and it would have elevated this pay-per-view card significantly because that is a top-notch featherweight fight, and it's going to be a main event of a fight night card. It's a month later, but I wish it was on this pay-per-view card. It would have made this card that much better. Moving on to the number 2 reason I hate UFC 286, and this might be strange for some of you, but it's the timing of this card. The main card starts at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. The prelims start at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And the early prelims start at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And I understand why they're doing it. They're accommodating the live audience in the UK. But for me, this ruins, I don't want to say it ruins the entire pay-per-view for me, but it ruins my whole day. You know, usually on Saturday I have stuff to do. I run around, do all that stuff before the night where we watch the pay-per-view. But also it throws me off completely. You know, I'm just been so used to having pay-per-views at the main cards at 10 p.m. Eastern. The prelims are at 8 p.m. Eastern. And I hate having them earlier in the day. It just, I don't know, there's something to it. I can't describe it. I'm sure some of you guys who are listening to this video understand what I'm saying. But it just throws off everything. It feels weird. It doesn't feel right. And it's just very disappointing for me personally. You know, if they moved it up an hour, they moved it up even 2 hours, that's fine. But they are moving it up 5 hours, and it just throws off my entire day. It throws off the entire pay-per-view. And I just hate it because now you have your entire Saturday during the day completely taken up. And don't get me wrong, I'm going to watch pretty much every fight on UFC 286. But I hate that it's not at its normal time. I'm a creature of habit. I like watching the prelims. The early prelims are at 6 or 6:30. The prelims are at 8. And the main card is at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. So for me, them changing this around completely throws me off. And I'm sure there's some people, maybe even watching this video, they didn't even realize this yet. So I'm sure there's going to be somebody, I don't know who it's going to be. There is going to be somebody out there who doesn't even realize the card is starting earlier, and they're going to go to tune in and realize it's already over. So I really feel bad for that person. Let me know if you're one of those people. Let me know down in the comments if I just informed you about the card timing being changed for UFC 286. And usually they do it, you know, they've done it for Khabib cards over in Abu Dhabi. They did it for Islam Makhachev versus Charles Oliveira over in Abu Dhabi. But for me, you know, it's a rare instance, but it's still, I feel like, and I know people are going to say, us UK fans stay up super late to watch these cards, and you American fans are complaining about having it on 5 p.m. Eastern Time. For me, it just throws off everything, and I genuinely hate it. I genuinely hate when they have a card earlier in the day. Now, if they shift it up an hour, 2 hours, I don't mind like an 8 p.m. main card start time. I don't mind like a 7 p.m. main card start time, but 5 p.m. main card start time is terrible, and I absolutely hate it. Moving on to the number 1 reason I hate UFC 286, and this reason actually drives me nuts. And if you watch the channel on a consistent basis, you already know the number 1 reason I hate UFC 286, and that is because Joanne Wood versus Luana Carolina is on the main card. It is the featured fight on the main card. That is disgusting. That is absolutely disgusting. I know why the UFC is doing it. It's because Joanne Wood is from the UK. You know, I think she's from Scotland or something along those lines. But, you know, this does not belong on a pay-per-view main card. This doesn't even belong as the headliner of the prelims. Matter of fact, Joanne Wood versus Luana Carolina, they don't even belong in the UFC. Joanne Wood is on a 3-fight losing streak, and she's lost 4 out of her last 5. Her only win in her last 5 fights is against Jessica Ai, who was retired. And she has absolutely no business being on a main card. Luana Carolina, she's on a 1-fight losing streak, but her last fight was against Molly McCann, who isn't even good. You know, I know a lot of people thought she was good, but she isn't even good. And Carolina got brutally KO'd in that fight. And, you know, Carolina's 8-3 in her MMA career. You have Joanne Wood, who's 15-8. And I know some people like to pretend that Joanne Wood is a good fighter. I don't, you know, not as much anymore, but like a year or two ago, the UFC kind of pretended like she's a good fighter. Some fans pretend like she's a good fighter. She has never been a good fighter. She's a horrible fighter, and she does not belong on a pay-per-view main card. And this main card is pretty decent. I mean, you got Marvin Vettori, Roman Dolidze on the main card. It's under Joanne Wood versus Luana Carolina. I mean, this is, I can't believe, who made this decision? Were they really sitting in a meeting and saying, oh, let's go over the UFC 286 bout order. Yeah, let's put Joanne Wood versus Luana Carolina on the main card, the featured fight on the main card. I want to know who made this decision, because there needs to be some type of retribution for this. Because you take a very good UFC 286 card and you just shit all over it. Honestly, I feel disrespected. I can't believe this is on the main card. I know people are going to say, you don't like it, don't watch it, or this is a bathroom break. I'm not one of these people that hate women's MMA, okay? I love watching Weili Zhang fight. I love watching Rose Namajunas fight up until the second fight with Carla Esparza. I love watching some of these elite level women fight. This ain't it. This ain't it. This is not elite level at all. This is a horrible fight that I don't want to see, that I don't care about, that I think is going to turn out terrible. I think it's going to be boring. It's going to be of a low skill level. And the only way that Joanne Wood versus Luana Carolina can redeem themselves being on a pay-per-view main card, one of them has to pull off the Boston Crab. That's the only way that they can redeem themselves, because otherwise I am just going to sit there repulsed that I'm even forced to watch such low-level MMA on a pay-per-view main card. Of all the fights they could have thrown on here, you could have threw Muhammad Mokaev on this. You know, there's plenty of other fights. Any other fight on the card, you could have literally thrown into this spot. I mean, you could have thrown, you know, Jake Hadley versus Malcolm Gordon. You could have threw Jai Herbert versus Ludovic Klein. Anything other than this. This should have been the first fight on the card. And instead, it is the featured bout on a pay-per-view main card. What a slap in the face this is. I mean, this is the equivalent to making us watch like a 40-minute power slap advertisement in the middle of a pay-per-view main card. I'm disgusted. I think the UFC should be ashamed of themselves. And I'm praying to the MMA gods. Sometimes, you know, the week of the fight or even the day before the fights, they rearrange the bout order. And I really hope they rearrange the bout order and bury this somewhere on the early prelims, because I don't know if I can sit here, because I'm going to be streaming the card, so make sure you're subscribed to the channel. I'll be live streaming this card. I don't know if I can sit here on live stream and watch Joanne Wood versus Luana Carolina on a featured fight on a pay-per-view main card in 2023. She is 15-8. Joanne Wood is. And we got to pretend she's good. She lost to Alexa Grasso and Talia Santos and Lauren Murphy in her last 3 fights. I know that's decent competition. She was never good. She was never good. She has a loss to Jennifer Maia in recent memory back in 2020. Not all that recent, but still. She doesn't belong in the UFC. Neither one of these girls belong in the UFC, let alone will they ever be a contender in the women's flyweight division. Absolutely not. And they have no business being on a UFC pay-per-view main card. And the only reason that they are there is because Joanne Wood is from the UK. And I'm really disgusted with this. And that is why that is my number one reason I hate UFC 286. Let me know what you guys think about all these reasons down in the comments. Am I overreacting to Joanne Wood versus Luana Carolina? Because I really don't think I am. It actually genuinely pisses me off. I'm not pretending to hate this just to hate it. It actually ruins the card for me. But let me know what you guys think about all my reasons. Don't forget to comment down below. What reasons do you hate UFC 286? Make sure to like the video, and thank you so much for watching.